Bills Live. We're coming to you from Orchard Park, right where the Bills work. We're inside the front end of the Pro Sports Training Center in the Seneca studio. Outside, 1, 2, 3 sets of doors is Bills practice. They just started about 10, 15 minutes ago, and our man Chris Brown, Bills insider from BuffaloBills.com, is standing by on the sidelines at practice. Hello, Brownie. It seems a little blustery out there, a little blowy, huh?
It is windy. It is about 30 to 35 mile per hour gusts. Not sustained, but kind of ebbing and flowing out here a little bit. So it'll certainly be a challenge for the quarterbacks today to a certain extent, and getting reads on the football for the receiving targets for sure. The weather forecast for Sunday is supposed to be rain and 57. I don't see anything in there for wind, so I don't know that this will necessarily be any beneficial prep for the weekend.
Gotcha. Let's talk about prep for the weekend and where the Bills stand as far as some of their injured. Matt Milano got hurt, 2 games ago, 3 weeks ago in the win at Tennessee, and he is McDermott said he'd be limited today with his hamstring. What do you see out there from Matt Milano?
Yeah, I mean, he's moving around here during the individual position drills. He was moving well last week, too. He wasn't really holding back, at least from what I could observe. But again, as we know, this is an organization and an athletic training staff and a medical staff that errs on the side of caution with soft tissue injuries. We saw Devin Singletary and Taron Johnson sit out for the better part of a month. And it wouldn't surprise me if both of those players were good enough to play in that Week 5 game against Tennessee. They waited an extra week. And Coach McDermott did admit to me, coming off of that game against Tennessee, that knowing the bye week was sitting there the very next week did factor into their thinking in sitting Devin Singletary and Taron Johnson for that game against Tennessee and waiting until Week 7 this past week before they started to integrate them back into the lineup. So we're only, as you mentioned, a few weeks removed from the time that Milano sustained that injury. It will be 3 weeks on Sunday. He may come all the way through the week. If he's limited all week, I really don't see him playing on Sunday. And if you remember, Devin Singletary was a full participant the Friday before the Tennessee game, coming off his hamstring injury, and he still did not play. So I don't know if we can count on Milano being in the lineup this week. We'll have to see how the rest of the week pans out. But knowing how they have operated to this point, I think it's 50-50 at best. I think the guy that's got a better chance is Corey Thompson, coming off the ankle scope. And if he is up and available to play, I would expect him to start for Milano rather than Maurice Alexander, who we saw last week with both Thompson and Milano out of the lineup.
What I was going to ask you next, Brownie, if Milano is out and Corey Thompson is available, or if he's not available. The Philadelphia Eagles have got some pretty good tight ends that a lot of Bills fans watched a defense without Matt Milano struggled to be the kind of defense we'd expected this season. How are they going to change it? And maybe with an extra week and seeing how their team played, they'll have a different plan entirely about how to deploy their linebackers without Matt Milano in. What do you think about how the defense will change given how they played last week?
Well, I think Thompson offers them more versatility at the linebacker position than Alexander. Miami had a good offensive scheme last week. They made a point of keeping Buffalo's base personnel out on the field by using their fullback in a lot of their early personnel groupings. They wanted to take advantage of a player who was inexperienced in this defense with the 10 other players in Maurice Alexander, and they accomplished that by keeping Buffalo's base personnel on the field. What Thompson offers is better versatility at the linebacker position. He has the athleticism to be a 3-down linebacker. He's a better coverage player, and he's a better runner. He's just simply faster and more athletic than Maurice Alexander. And if you remember, you go back to the summer, Corey Thompson had a really strong training camp, made big strides with his game, knows this defense well now that he's in his second year in it. And so I think he would be the guy that gets the call if Matt Milano doesn't play on Sunday.
Chris Brown joins us from the sidelines of Bills practice. They're outside on the windy grass practice field number 1 outside the Pro Sports Training Center. Chris, I was really, really happy, and I don't usually care too much about the AFC offensive players of the weeks, but man, Tre'Davious White earned that honor this week, the AFC Defensive Player of the Week, and I'm sure his teammates, and you could tell Sean McDermott feel pretty good that he was honored that way by the entire league today.
Yeah, I mean, he was the spark that turned the game around. I mean, I even asked Coach McDermott that after the game. I said, was Tre'Davious White the spark you needed to win this game, and he pretty much agreed that yes, he was. And even Josh Allen after the game said, Tre'Davious is, with his play, gave us some juice on offense, and that was evident because they drove 98 yards down the field and stuck it in the end zone. And so you look at that, and then you look at his forced fumble at the end of the game, and he turned the game around. And there's a stat out there, and I hope I get this right, but I believe 12 of Tre'Davious' career turnovers have come in the second half of football games. I mean, he doesn't just make turnover-type plays, big-type plays. He makes them in big-time situations. I mean, he had 2 takeaways in the Cincinnati game that helped seal the game against the Bengals in Week 3. You can go back to the Kansas City game, the interception he had in the fourth quarter to seal that game, which was a 1-score game at the time in his rookie season. The Tampa Bay game here in Buffalo, his rookie season, where he punches the ball out of Adam Humphries' hands. They get a recovery. They kick a game-winning field goal to win the game. So he not only makes big plays, he makes them in big moments.
One of the things about Tre'Davious' performance last week was the fact that he didn't get targeted very much because the Miami Dolphins, were going right at Levi Wallace. They were putting big-time physical receivers on Wallace. And how do you expect the defense to evolve given the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles have got Alshon Jeffries, and they may do the exact same thing?
Right. I think where Levi struggles is in press man. That's where he has problems. In zone coverage calls, he's outstanding. But when they go to a man call, and they had to do that a little bit more last week, they relied on their corners a little bit more than they usually do. Levi had a little bit of trouble in getting good jams on the guys at the line of scrimmage, and they won a couple of times off of good release technique. So it's going to be interesting to see how Leslie Frazier calls the game this week, knowing the size and stature of the receiving targets that Philadelphia can put on the field, chief among them Alshon Jeffrey, as you mentioned. It's also going to be a challenge for Buffalo's safeties this week, not only because of Zach Ertz, who's the leading receiver on the Eagles squad, the tight end, but his counterpart at tight end, Dallas Goedert, who goes 6'5", 6'6", and has made plays down the seam for them. So there are some size mismatches that Philadelphia throws at opposing secondaries that really present problems. Whether you're covering them in man or you have good coverage on them or not, they simply outreach you for the football.
Chris Brown keeping an eye on practice for us. He's outside on the grass practice field. I want to ask you about the Buffalo offense, Chris. And the three of us spent a lot of time before the Dolphin game talking about, kind of the new additions to the offense and some guys who may have a role to play. And I'd love to see Duke Williams jump into a more prominent role on the offense, but limited today, I guess, right, with his shoulder. Who knows if he'll be ready to play on Sunday?
Yeah, he's got a red non-contact jersey out here, as does Kevin Johnson, who's coming off the stinger that he suffered in last Sunday's game. And John Brown is not out on the field today. So, we know he was dealing with a groin injury last week, played almost 100% of the snaps last week, but perhaps there's some residual soreness there, and maybe he gets the day off today for that. And hopefully he's back out here tomorrow. But, yeah, he's not out here either. Kurt Coleman is another veteran player getting a veteran rest day. He left the game for a period last week, so I don't know if that's injury-related or a veteran rest day situation. And then Pat DeMarco and Lorenzo Alexander, Ty and Secchi all getting veteran rest days, as has been customary for those guys. So, yeah, some nicked-up guys. And John Brown, obviously, the biggest name on that list, knowing his importance to Buffalo's offense.
Steve wants to know when he gets a veteran rest day.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Also, I want to ask you a little bit about were you surprised at Devin Singletary's role in the offense against the Dolphins? He was on the field for 22 of the 56 snaps. Didn't get that many opportunities to touch the ball. What do you make of that?
I see that as reacclimating him to the speed of the game, the reads that he has to make. But yeah, remember, guys, I mean, he played 1 3/4 games of NFL football in his life, and then he missed 4 weeks. I think they were a little reluctant to just throw him back in the fire and give him 15 to 20 carries. I just think that was an unrealistic expectation, knowing how methodically this coaching staff operates in developing players, in immersing players in certain responsibilities in games. And so I think the plan was let's ease Devin Singletary back into the fold here, remembering that he is a rookie with limited experience, and see how he does. And I thought he did okay last week. He did good in adjusting to some of the changes at the line of scrimmage. The one that comes to mind is the pass that went to Duke Williams as he ran a pattern on a crosser right to left. Josh changed the protection, and that put Devin Singletary in a situation where off a play-action fake, he had to pick up a blitzing slot corner, and he did a good job of that. And the play went for a first down to Duke Williams on an over-the-shoulder throw. So I think he availed himself well despite the layoff, and so I anticipate he will get more work this week than he did last week.
Hey, Chris, I know we're kind of running short on time, but I do want to ask you about one, I think, intriguing matchup this game, and it's Buffalo's developing young quarterback, Josh Allen, now will be his 18th start, going against Jim Schwartz. Schwartz is not, the Belichick group there, but he's got a plan. He'll know what to do with a young quarterback like Josh Allen, won't he?
Yeah, and, we're going to see that wide nine technique that we remember from when he was here with Buffalo, and, it's going to alter the spacing up front. It's going to put the tackles out on islands a little bit more, and that has me a little bit concerned for Cody Ford, knowing that he's struggled in sometimes oversetting to account for pass rushers taking a wide run at quarterbacks around the pocket, and sometimes he'll overset and get beat inside. So it's going to be interesting to see how they set up the protections this week, knowing the scheme that Philadelphia employs. And it's a great defensive line. It absolutely is, but they are nicked up to high heaven on that side for Philadelphia. They're banged up at a number of positions, including corner, where they're going to probably have to reinsert Sidney Jones as the nickel. And if you talk to Philadelphia fans and listen to Philadelphia sports radio, they loathe the former first-round pick. So they're banged up at defensive tackle as well. And they're not going to have Tim Jernigan. They already lost Malik Jackson, who's on IR. They picked up a couple of guys off waivers that they have just as depth at defensive tackle. So hopefully the thin numbers for Philadelphia's defensive line makes them a little bit less effective than they're known to be.
Hey, Chris, thanks for this. We'll check with you at practice again tomorrow. Thank you.
You got it, guys.